The answer is mercantilism, the idea of controlling the economy for the mother country. Shipping goods, the mother country makes the profit off the goods being shipped into her country. Okay? Deism. An idea that came to the United States in the 1700s from England, and it comes from the Enlightenment. Deism is kind of the idea of an absentee God. God creates the heavens and the earth and then leaves everything to man's devices. According to a deist, it doesn't do you any good to pray because there's no God out there listening to your prayers. This was the antithesis of what people believed in the Puritan communities, for instance, okay? Where God takes an active interest in what's happening in the community, what's happening in people's lives, or what people are doing, all those kinds of things. The Enlightenment comes from the scientific revolution, the age of reason, the idea that people should look at things through a reasonable rather than religious point of view. The idea that all people are equal. The whole idea of whether God is present on an everyday basis on our lives or not. Enlightenment says no. Religious people said yes. Because of the Enlightenment and its ideas coming to America, first of all, who were the two deist Enlightenment thinkers of America in the 1700s? Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Okay? As a result of the Enlightenment and deism, we end up with the First Great Awakening in the 1700s. They wanted religion to be an emotional experience, the hellfire and brimstone kind of experience where you were fearful that God was going to strike you down if you didn't behave. The major speaker for the First Great Awakening or the Great Awakening is Jonathan Edwards, whose sermon is Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, where God dangles man over the pit of Hades like a spider. He makes that analogy. The idea is that people would be scared in going to church and scared of God. The deists really, because God doesn't punish people, God's not a figure up there counting remarks against you type of thing. Okay? One of the things that have had people worried in the Great Awakening, in the first one and the second one for that matter, but we haven't gotten there yet, is the fact that who has the right answer? Which church is correct? Because people wanted to be sure that they're going to go to heaven. And that became a problem for them, deciding which church was correct. Mary Rowlandson, in the late 80s, she appeared on the test. She's only appeared one time, but it took me about a week to find out who she was, because this is prior to Google. Okay? Mary Rowlandson was a Puritan woman who got captured by the Indians during King Philip's War and dragged off from her Puritan village to upstate New York, where she managed to escape the Indians finally, and all by her little lonesome self, made it all the way back to her village in Massachusetts. An example of Puritan woman bravery. That was the question. All right, the Albany Plan of Union, 1754. The colonists were really concerned about the Native Americans. They were concerned with the French trying to occupy the Ohio River Valley and trade with the Indians, and the Indians causing problems with their land, etc. So they met at Albany to plan what they should do. This was a meeting to talk about colonial defense against the Indians. What they came up with was the idea of having a Grand Council, a representative from all the colonies on this council. The council would supervise a colonial army or militia to defend the colonists against the Indians. How would this be paid for? The Grand Council would assess a tax, and they would assess Dillon Colony one tax, and Alyssa Colony another tax, and Adam Colony a tax, etc. And that would pay for the troops. Okay? So each of the members at the Albany Plan decide they have to go back to their colony and sell the plan. That's when the next term, the Join or Die cartoon comes about. Ben Franklin is the cartoonist who published that cartoon, which is the snake chopped into the parts of the colonies. And the idea is that if we don't put together the Albany Plan of Union, we're going to be like a snake all chopped up into parts and we'll die off. If we band together, then we are a lethal snake. We can poison people because we're strong. Okay? What happens to the Albany Plan of Union? It fails because of taxes. Those colonists didn't want to pay taxes, period. Okay? Washington's role in the French and Indian War. In 1754, Washington is ordered by the British to take some militiamen into western Pennsylvania to Fort Duquesne area, which is around modern-day Pittsburgh, and tell the French to leave because they want to control the Indians in that area and the fur trade. So Washington and his militiamen go out to Fort Duquesne. They tell the French to leave. The French say to them, right. And Washington goes several miles away. He builds his own little fort called Fort Necessity. The French let him build it, and then they put it under siege, and Washington and his men are forced to leave. He goes back to the coast and says to General Braddock, English general, this is what happened. Braddock says, and so the next year, in 1755, the British come back with Braddock has his militiamen, i.e. Washington and his people, and now he's taking British troops out. In the fight with the French, Braddock is actually killed. The French leave Fort Duquesne, but it stirs up the whole controversy. This is the beginning of the French and Indian War. Okay? Causes of the French and Indian War. Who controls the Ohio River Valley and the fur trade with the Indians? Americans were already starting to move across the Appalachian Mountains into Ohio to farm because the soil was so rich. Another cause is the problem that the French Indian War will be the fourth war between England and France in 100 years. And all of them have spilled over into the colonies. We're talking King William's War, Queen Anne's War, King George's War, and now the French and Indian War. So the fact that Britain and France are fighting in Europe spills over to the colonies too. And there's the whole thing with the Ohio River Valley. Okay. Results or effects of the French and Indian War. Number one, the French lose all their territory in North America. All of Canada goes to England. They lose Louisiana, but they're allowed to give it to their allies, so they give it to Spain. So they lose big time. They lose, except for their possessions in the Caribbean. Like they still have Haiti, they still have Martinique, okay? But they've lost major land. Another result or effect of the French and Indian War is the British now control the Ohio River Valley. And they can do with it what they want, and we'll talk about what they do in a minute. A third effect, the British are deeply, deeply in debt. And they come to the colonists to help pay off part of that debt because they feel like that the war was really fought over the colonies, not over something done in Europe. Okay? And I think a fourth effect of the French and Indian War is the beginning of the whole idea of revolution amongst the American colonists. Because the British decide to leave troops in North America to protect the colonists. Now, who are they going to protect them against? The Indians. So where do they station all the troops? In Boston, New York. How many Indians do we see in Boston in 1770? None. Okay? What led to the Revolutionary War? Was it because of taxes from the French and Indian War? Was it because of Navigation Act? Or was it because there was a new king? Taxes. Okay? What happened to France as a result of the French and Indian War? They lost all their land in North America. Iroquois and French and Indian War. Okay, there's a tribe of Indians in New York called the Iroquois. There's also the Iroquois League, which is a grouping of 5 Indian tribes, which included the Iroquois, the Mohawks, and I don't remember the other 3 off the top of my head. The Iroquois and the Iroquois League were the only Indians that ever supported the British. During the French and Indian War, the Iroquois actually remained neutral. They didn't support either side, but the fact that they didn't support the French is seen as a support of England. Okay?